Spider-Man.
Look, next time, leave the fighting to the pros.
Okay, but what if there aren't any around?
Good one.
New York! Now you've been summoned for a special occasion.
I'm the one who kept order in this city!
Apparently the show's not over. Is there anyone left in New York who doesn't want me dead?
A thin line between living and dying. I'm on the edge and I might just die.
Next time you get in my way, I will not be so gentle.
Girl problems again.
Gotcha!
Shut up!
Coming up. Feel the rush.
Hands up!
Feel the rush. I said this ain't legendary. Yeah.
Rated T for teen.
Okay, everybody, it's finally here. It's time for Malik and I to talk about Spider-Man PS4. We've both played it. In just a moment, I guess, we'll get into how far in both of us have made it. I think it's safe to say, though, we both, if we haven't completed it, platinumed it, we're both close. And, I don't know, just opening thoughts. This is freaking amazing. Like, the fact that I'm as close as I am to 100% in this game is almost all I need to say, because I never do that with games that aren't, like, ridiculously easy. Like, especially if it's a story-driven game, I'm very much a story guy. So it tells you almost all you need to know immediately in one sense, that, like, if I haven't already 100% of this game, I'm going to do it just because this is that fun. And, like, I don't know, just, that's my real quick one-sentence opening thought. Malik, you've been more than anyone I know. How do you feel having finally gotten the chance to play it?
Insomniac has finally done it. They've made damn near as close as you can get to perfect. They've made the perfect Spider-Man game, the perfect Spider-Man experience. Everything down from the story to the aesthetics to the voice cast, the combat, the swinging, everything.
I know. It's just, I was struggling with this for a minute because I didn't want to come off like I was jumping on a bandwagon or I was just buying into everyone else's hype. But I genuinely think this is just one of, if not the best Spider-Man things. Like, I feel bad saying this because I still love Spider-Man Homecoming. I think as far as movies go, that's still far and away the best Spider-Man movie. This game, the story of this game and just the experience of playing through it, makes that movie look bad by comparison. It almost makes the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon look bad by comparison. It's, I don't know. Like, I've said this in a Facebook post, and you sort of echoed my thoughts. It's like, I never thought anything would supplant that, and especially the Spectacular cartoon as, like, my definitive Spider-Man. And it's weird to think that in just a couple of days this game has done that, but it's happened. It's such a weird feeling. It's like it's just perfect.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't have the exact same thoughts as you in that way. I don't think I wouldn't go as far as saying it makes Homecoming or even Spectacular Spider-Man look bad. It's become like the trifecta, like another definitive take on Spider-Man and his mythos. Like,
yeah, if I'm gonna agree, then those are my top 3 takes. But this game, I gotta give it to number 1. Like, I think say, like, what are my top 3, like, Spider-Man versions just in general? It's this at number 1, Spectacular at number 2, and the MCU at number 3, I think. That's where I'm at right now.
I would agree with that if I agree with. I don't agree with ranking them like on principle just because there's such vastly different mediums, and this game, has the advantage of being a game, and it can do things both other mediums just can't do.
It's almost like now that this game's out and we've played it, it does seem almost unfair to say like, well, of course this one has the advantage because it's a video game. But I almost feel weird saying that because before playing this game, I'd have never assumed that. Because we've had tons and tons of Spider-Man games, and I don't think any of them have come close to, like, enjoyment of, say, a movie. And this is speaking, like, now in purely story terms, because as we've gone over before, there are a lot of Spider-Man games that I haven't played, or I haven't played in a couple of years. But I sort of have this immediate feeling of, like, if it's a video game, I'm gonna really enjoy the gameplay, and everything else, like the story and the characterization and just the mythos, is gonna be kind of like, it's there, it's cool, but it's not really like a strong take. Whereas a movie or a cartoon will have to be stronger in like the storytelling and characterization department to make up for the fact that it's not interactive. This game has the perfect balance of both, and I really didn't think like a video game period could make me feel that way. This is like great territory for me.
I mean, this isn't new territory for me in that sense, because I am more of a gamer than you, and like I would say ever since like the first season of Walking Dead, Last of Us, and the Last of Us, and even a bit of the Uncharted games, you get a like compelling story out of those games. And with Last of Us in particular, that was the game that really cemented doing motion capture performances in video games. Like, I don't know if you've ever played that game or seen any of the gameplay of it, but almost everyone who has played that game has had a hardcore emotional response to it, and that's because like you see the human performances through those animated characters, and it's not just animation. Like, you're seeing like real people give performances through those characters. It was like when you're in a cutscene, you're essentially watching a movie.
Like
it was that good, and I feel like we don't get this game without that, because every single cutscene in this game is that. It's all motion captured. It's not just them recording their voices. They're out on a motion capture stage doing these scenes, and they got like some of the best in voice talent to do those scenes. And I think that's one of the big reasons why this game works so well story-wise and emotionally, because they've got real people doing it.
Yeah, and it's like I don't undersell video games as like a storytelling medium. I understand that almost since for a couple of decades now in video games we've been using them as really compelling storytelling means. It's difficult to put into words. Like, it's not just that this game has a great story, because if it just had a really good story that was like on par with one of the movies, then I'd say yeah, but it's like, again, the word I keep coming to is mythos, because it takes advantage of being a video game in that it captures everything. It's not just a great story about Spider-Man with a beginning, middle, end. It really gives you the experience of an entire Spider-Man universe in a way that a movie can't, and even 2 seasons of a cartoon close to, but not really, where it's like, okay, we should set this up and also make it clear for anyone listening to this, yes, this is full-on spoilers. We're gonna get into all the nooks and crannies, no stone left unturned, hopefully. So if you haven't experienced the story of this game for yourself, or you haven't gone out and done all of the collectibles, done all the side missions, we're gonna get into everything that we can. So if you don't mind that, or you've already done it, keep listening. If not, do experience this game for yourself. It's so worth it. But
yeah,
for setup,
but before we delve more into the story-wise, I just want to say, yeah, buy this game. If you're one of the people who does not own a PS4, or just haven't bought the game yet, and you have a PS4, I would say it's damn near worth it. Like, maybe not the price point of a PS4, depending on your financial situation, but like there are plenty of other games out there, including this, that are worth getting a PS4. Like this, The Last of Us, the second Last of Us is coming out fairly soon. Pretty much, I mean, all the Telltale games you can get those on Xbox One as well. But just there are so many great games out there. Like, when you can, grab yourself a PS4 and play this game. It's incredible.
yeah, like I didn't to buy the game for a little while because I'm kind of I'd planned to wait until I'd gotten a bit more money under my belt to get this game, but just I guess my mom heard how excited for it I was, and she like sprung it on me as a surprise because I have the best mom in the world. So I'm like, you know what? My initial reaction to that was like, oh no, like hundreds of dollars. I feel so bad, but 100% worth it. Like, I have zero complaints. Like, just if there was any game that I was gonna splurge on, then yes, this is it. But yeah, okay. So for context, just if you're not 100% on the story of this game, Peter Parker, he's been Spider-Man for 8 years. We have this really nice, succinct opening that visually conveys sort of his career. And I watched this video by Mother's Basement that made a really good point of, we open with these newspapers on Peter's wall, and you can tell by like the quality of the newspaper, you can kind of make a timeline of events. And that's a really neat touch. So this is a Peter who's kind of started off fighting guys like Vulture and just sort of normal criminals. Well, not normal criminals, but like, I'll get into the whole dynamic of the Sinister Six in a bit. But we open with him taking down Fisk, Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, and immediately, like, that's such a great story choice of like, in interviews, the director of this game, Brian Inatard. I knew I was gonna mess that up. Like, see, I told myself before, don't say Inatar, but I messed it up anyway. Thank you, Brian Intihar. He mentioned how he wanted it to feel like the ending of a different story going into the beginning of this one, like a comic book run. And it does feel that way, but it's still such the perfect way to open this game, because everything indirectly spirals out from the fact that you took down the Kingpin. And so it's such a great, like, inciting incident where Kingpin goes down, and this gang of sort of like superpowered, like almost Yakuza shows up, called the Demons. And the way the game pans out, for a while, like for a couple hours of the game, you think it's just sort of a gang turf war of like these guys moving in on Fisk's goods and like weapons and stuff because he's gone. You don't really know what the deal is. You think it's just like a power struggle thing. But as more and more layers of the story get peeled back, like Martin Lee, his role becomes clear, Dr. Octavius, Norman Osborn, like all of their sort of connections in this big story gets made apparent, and it becomes more and more epic and more personal for Peter. But I like the sense of escalation, where it's like at first you just think you're dealing with weirdo criminals who are trying to fill up Fisk's power vacuum. And the decision to take down Fisk keeps spiraling out into more and more, like none of the rest of the story would have happened if not for Peter's own actions. And that immediately creates like a personal stake of like, oh, this is like a real, like, power and responsibility story, like from the beginning.
Yeah, they picked the perfect way to kick off this game. Brian Intihar talked a lot about how he wanted the player to feel like Spider-Man immediately. Like the second you pick up the controller and start playing, you're Spider-Man, you're thrown into the world. And like they kept talking about how in interviews about how they didn't want to do an origin story. They wanted to get away from the origin story. I feel like that's pretty evident, and we keep talking about Spider-Man's origins like we've done it 500,000 times, but we did it twice cinematically. I understand why everyone is sick to death of seeing it, but I wish we would stop speaking in hyperbole. But anyway, I am glad that this obviously wasn't an origin story, and it was a fresh, new story with a Spider-Man well into his career as an adult, out of college, and a scientist. Like, we haven't really seen this before. They decided to tread pretty much all new ground, and I thought it was fantastic. Before I get into my thoughts on... Go ahead.
Just in terms of why I think people complain so much about the origin, I think it's because, first of all, people are also very attached to Spectacular and the 90s cartoon, and those don't open with an origin, but each of them sort of like dedicate an episode or episodes to a type of origin. Like Spectacular gives us an origin flashback episode. The 90s series gives us episodes where like Uncle Ben is a character, even if it's like weird alternate universe Uncle Ben. And the Raimi trilogy sort of kept going back to it. Like, we keep having scenes in the second and third movies going back to that moment. So I think people don't necessarily have a problem with the origin being retold. I think they just don't like being constantly reminded of it, and they just aren't articulating that.
Well, that's the thing that I like about this game, and that is my only real gripe with Spider-Man Homecoming. That movie goes out of its way to avoid mentioning him at all.
Yeah.
And, with this game, we get tons of references to him and mentions. Well, not tons, but we get plenty of references and mentions of him. But we don't feel at all like we need to remind the audience of the lesson that he learned from his origin. He already knows it, and he is constantly having that lesson put to the test throughout this game.
Yeah, I sided with the decision to not mention him, just because, for the most part, it seems like audiences reacted well to that decision. But I do think this game, again, it's all about like the perfect balance that this game strikes, where Homecoming definitely felt like you could tell behind the scenes it was a conscious decision. We're not making this about Uncle Ben, don't bring him up at all. In this game, it feels like someone was like, don't make it an origin thing, but the characters and the world of like Peter's sort of psyche bring up Uncle Ben about as naturally as you would expect them to. Like, it doesn't feel like the characters are trying to avoid talking about it, and that was the one element of Homecoming that felt kind of stilted. And here, it's like, yeah, alright, Scorpion, like Weird Dreams Scorpion, will mention Uncle Ben, but it makes sense because he's in Peter's head. Peter's kind of going through another weird mentor figure crisis. Of course he'd be thinking about that. So the game isn't afraid to bring it up visually or in passing where it makes sense to mention him.
Yeah. I want to talk about how this game gets made. So Marvel initially approaches Insomniac about doing the game, the CEO, and he then went to the rest of the company and were like, would you guys be interested in doing a Marvel game? I mean, we're pretty much an independent studio. We've been doing most of our own stuff. They did Sunset Overdrive, Ratchet and Clank. So, and that's our bread and butter. That's what we know, and we'd be handling a known IP that people like love and care about. And of course, the decision was unanimous across the board. Yes, you have to do it. And Brian Intihar in particular was like, Spider-Man. Like, who knows if we're going to get to do other games? The first game we have to do is Spider-Man.
And now we know for sure other games, because this is the fastest selling PlayStation exclusive of all time. So I'm sure those guys are proud of the accomplishment.
They are. It's been great to see. We don't know that for a fact because they still haven't announced a sequel to the game or any other games that are going to take place in the same universe. They haven't announced it yet. I don't know how far off an announcement would be. I'm sure we'll get one. They just haven't like announced it, like, you know, signed on the dotted line, made the deals.
Yeah.
We don't know for sure yet, but I think it's pretty safe to assume we will get a sequel or some other character that's in this world.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't think until just now, but I guess like later on, toward the end, once we finish talking about this game, we can do kind of like a what other material or characters we'd like to see this studio make a game about, if you're interested.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, so just for now, we've talked about our general thoughts on the game's like overall quality and the origins of the game. Story-wise, I guess, I'm sort of at a crossroads. On the one hand, I want to talk about Peter just as a character, but that also makes me primarily want to talk about Yuri Lowenthal and just the voice acting in general, and just the acting, because you mentioned that this is a game where they sort of directed it like a movie where they got actors to come in and give physical performances on a set, and Brian Intar talks about the experience of like working with the actors doing the characters. It's like, it's so great. Like Yuri Lowenthal, his performance is a big part of why this is my definitive Peter right now. He's so great. Like before, my definitive like voice for the character was Josh Keaton, who I will talk about more because he's also in this game. But I don't know. Tell me if you had this, but in certain moments, I feel like Lowenthal almost is giving a perfect mix of Josh Keaton and Andrew Garfield in terms of his vocal performance, the way that he makes Peter move physically, the sort of almost accent that he has at times. Like, I don't know, I get a kind of perfect mix of those two performances from this game. And for Peter in his early 20s, that's such a perfect choice to me.
Well, I don't know if I necessarily got Josh Keaton and Andrew Garfield from him. I got a hint of Andrew Garfield in there, but all that quickly fell away, and he was just the character. He was just Peter Parker. Like looking at the story and like what they've done with it, like in the back of my head, I'm like, if they could ever pull off doing a movie version of this in 2.5 hours or 2 hours and like 45 minutes, I still would love Andrew Garfield to have been that version. If they would have done like 8 years, 23-year-old Peter Parker, an adult who's already went past high school and college, if they were to have done that as a film, I think Andrew Garfield would have been perfect for that. And it kind of sucks that Sony didn't have any other ideas other than let's just reboot the franchise with telling the origin again. But anyway, just as like I agree with you, like Josh Keaton was my definitive voice for the character as well. And when I would go back and read Ultimate Spider-Man, which is my favorite run on the character in comics, I would hear Josh Keaton's voice as I read Peter Parker's thoughts and words. And I still think that's well, I still think that's probably going to be the case because that's teenage Peter Parker. Yeah. Yuri's doing adult Peter Parker. But it works so well, and he does edge out Josh Keaton for me. Which is so weird because Josh Keaton is also in this game, but he's playing Electro. And I knew that before going into the game. So I was like, this is going to be so weird. And like, I want to say maybe 2-3 hours into the game, like, I didn't completely forget about it, but that quickly like fell out of my mind. And I was like, this guy is Peter Parker. Like, he nailed it. And I know you don't like Naruto, but my first exposure Yuri Lowenthal is the American dub voice for Sasuke, and he's playing such a different, like, dark, damaged character, who is set on this vendetta, and it was strange to like know that he'd be the Peter Parker voice for this game, knowing that and just how different that is, but that just proves how versatile he is as an actor, and he crushed it.
Yeah, okay, I don't want to make... because I realize how comparing him to Keaton and Garfield might sound. I don't want to make it sound like I was listening to his performance and just thinking of other actors. That's a disservice to him, and the last thing I want to do is sort of trivialize his performance like that, just because I'm personally worried with the sheer amount of things that there are to talk about in this game. I haven't read or watched that many reviews of this game, so I can't be sure. I just have this like feeling in the back of my head that Yuri Lowenthal is not gonna get the due credit that he deserves in every review, and it's like, no, so much of the game and why it works is on this guy, and this is, to my mind, the best VA performance he's ever given, and he deserves every single piece of credit that he can possibly get from every angle for that. And I feel like a complete idiot for never realizing that he was the voice of Sasuke, because I didn't watch Naruto a lot. But just going off the little that I have watched, it feels like completely obvious. Like, of course that's his voice. But I primarily know him from two places. I know him primarily as the teenaged version of Ben 10 from the Cartoon Network show, and as a character called Neil in this web series Camp Camp. And those are two very different voices. And when I heard that he was going to be Spider-Man in this game, part of me was kind of just expecting to hear Ben 10 the whole time, and that never happened.
Same. I know him from Ben 10 also, and I was also a pretty big fan of that show growing up, and like that fell away. Like, I wasn't hearing Sasuke, I wasn't hearing Ben Tennyson, I was just hearing Peter Parker, and that was phenomenal.
Yeah, like, I feel bad so long because just those four roles, or these four roles, I guess, exemplify like such a great range that he has, where, like you said, he can do broody and edgy, and like we kind of get the parody version of that with Spider Cop here, which is great.
Which is like one of the best,
whenever
funniest
he does the
original.
Spider Cop thing, I'm gonna be picturing.
Yeah, I haven't read that anywhere. Like, I'm pretty sure they didn't get that from like some comic anywhere. That's just an original bit that they came up with and kept running with, and I think it's great.
Yeah, I think he mentioned that they came up with that like that wasn't even written. I think Spider Cop, or was it some other running gag, was something that like did in recording, and that's so great. And like the Neil character that I mentioned from Camp Camp, he can also play like adolescent and really whiny and kind of insecure. And Peter Parker doesn't have any of that. It's like he's just he's so great. He's so great. I don't want to get too hung up, but Yuri, you're the best. You carry so much of this already great game and make it even better. You're the best, man. But also,
before we move off from Yuri and talk about the other voice cast, he has two main stunt performers playing him in a few of the action scenes, and that they actually like do some of the moves that he does when you're just fighting in combat. I want to give those guys props because everything Spider-Man does in this game looks amazing, and there's a good bit of it that is actually done by performers on stage.
Yeah. I saw the behind the scenes of that. It's really good. It's really cool.
Okay, so go ahead with what you're gonna say.
Outside of Yuri, I feel like the two standout performances are Octavius and J. Jonah Jameson. I forgot the actors' names. I'm gonna look them up right now. But I never thought anyone could come close to J.K. Simmons as Jameson. I think I'm gonna need a little bit longer to ruminate on it, but I think this guy might surpass him. Like, even if it's only slightly, like, I never thought that was possible. But I might have a preferred voice for JJ now. And he's not even in any actual scenes. He's
we just hear his voice.
Yeah. It's good. It's like they really lucked out, or the voice directing was spectacular, because they've got like just such perfect takes for these characters.
I don't know if I can put him over J.K. Simmons just because, like, we never actually see him doing the performance. It's just his voice, which is it's really, really good, and I like it a lot. It's a big part of why I love this game so much, because we get a lot of like storytelling done through and like world building through Jameson when you're just swinging around and hearing his podcast.
Yeah.
But he was still really, really great. We didn't even have to see his face, and I like that we didn't even see his face, because he was.
It's kind of just as far as voice acting goes, that weird sort of catch-22, right? Where on the one hand you want to say we can't necessarily call him better than a performance where we actually get to see the physical performance, but on the other hand, because it's just a voice, that means you kind of have to work harder to convey more emotion where you can't physically. So is it really fair to judge?
Yeah. So you said that the two other like standout performances for you in this game were the guy playing Octavius and the guy playing J.K. The guy playing J. Jonah Jameson.
Who are Selliers and Dan DePaul, respectively.
Okay. I do want to get to Mary Jane because she's played by one of my favorite voice actors, but let's talk about those two first.
Yeah, just about the actors. We'll also talk about the characters and just the way that they're written. I really like, I like how much of a flip-flop Jameson is. Like, he has this thing where I have sort of my take on J.K. Simmons Jameson, where I feel like the reason, or at least part of the reason, he's so hard on Spider-Man is that he's almost trying to indirectly encourage him. And there are bits here where I feel like they're playing on that idea, where he's like, hey, Spider-Man, you great. Do it within the boundaries of the law. Like, don't accidentally put people in danger or think about the consequences of your actions. And it's a really fine line that they walk between the Jameson who's just a selfish, like self-interested, my way is the right way conspiracy theorist who's wrong about everything, and the Jameson who's kind of like expositing on responsibility and is in a weird way right about everything. Like, it's so weird to think of it, like, it goes back and forth constantly of like, oh, it's just Jameson being a kook, and no, he's raising really salient points, and he really does come off like a genuine man of the people sometimes. And it's a really nice balance that they hit with him.
And I like that because you get a fair bit of storytelling and world building done through him when you're swinging around, and like that makes it so that you couldn't just make like a cutscene version of the game. Like, you can put all the cutscenes together and form a very basic impression of the story, but you're still not getting everything in the world building because a lot of that happens outside of cutscenes and through gameplay, which I think is great.
Yeah. I never thought you could do that where, like, J. Jonah Jameson is like the voice in your ear that kind of makes you think about things, where he has... One of my favorite examples is when he says something along the lines of, like, if you want to fight... I kind of see your point. And then immediately after that he goes, And to all the people saying, what about how that could endanger his loved ones? I'm not convinced that guy has any loved ones. And I'm like, okay, you flipped the switch and you lost me. It's
That's hilarious. Yeah, that's one of his funniest lines in the whole game.
And it's like he's almost like a likable Alex Jones, and I never thought that would be possible. But then there's okay, so I guess
Can I talk
we're
about
gonna
Otto first?
Yep, we're gonna talk about Otto, which to me feels a little weird, just because he is definitely the next biggest character in the story, I think, outside of Peter and maybe MJ. But it feels kind of strange because he's not Dr. Octopus for most of the game. Like, most of the game is either, well, we start with a lot of hours is Martin Lee, Mr. Negative, in the antagonist role, but Otto Octavius is like such a strong presence. And like part of the reason it feels weird for me to call this a definitive take on the Spider-Man mythos is just like having him be Peter's mentor and like having them be in such a close relationship for most of the game is like kind of unprecedented as a narrative decision. Like in Spider-Man 2, they start out as kind of pals and they have a rapport, but they only like hang out once or twice before stuff goes really bad. Here it's like they have a relationship of a year or a couple of years working together, and it's such a refreshing like new angle to go on. And it's like, how did you feel like finding out that was the angle that they were going with it? Because I was just shocked.
I was shocked, but also thrilled. Doc Ock is one of the big things that they kept a lid on leading up to the game's release, and I was so impressed with them for that, because he's not in a single trailer, it's not hinted at all, and like going into this game, if you've seen a fair amount of the promotional material, all you know is they're gonna do Sinister Six and Mr. Negative, who is one of the lesser known Spider-Man villains. They wanted to put him in the spotlight to differentiate their story from other stories, and that's kind of what you know, and that we're doing an older Peter Parker and avoiding the origin story and all that. So going into this game, when we got to him, and like how they echoed it with like all those mechanical like tubes he's attached to, I was like, wow, like that's our first shot of him echoing what's going to happen to him at the end of the game. And
Exactly.
when you first see that, you're like, holy crap, like he's gonna be Otto, right? And then like as he's gonna be Dr. Octopus, right? And then as you're playing through the game, you're like, well, maybe he won't. Like you're like his he's your mentor, you're playing as Peter, you guys are working together, you're both passionate scientists, you both want to make a difference, and you're like, oh wow, maybe this version of the game won't play out like that. Maybe he doesn't become Dr. Octopus and he's just a good guy. And then slowly but surely, like through this turn of events, like Norman taking away their funding, and Doc like not doing the right tests and like rushing the experiments, and the neural inhibitor failing.
Yeah.
You see him slowly make the transition to that iconic character that we all know and love, and I thought it was absolutely.
And it's not even just like, it's like in the through the like neural interface or like the circuitry mini games, you as Peter are helping him along that path. And like that, just to sidetrack to this for just a second, that again is part of what makes this game so perfect, is the perfect balance of gameplay enhancing story. Like there's no aspect of this gameplay that is not simultaneously enhancing story. Like the MJ and Miles stealth sections are enhancing the story because they ground you for a bit in those characters and get you more emotionally with them. But even these kind of like, you could say really pithy, like, puzzle mini games. Like, this is Peter helping Otto become Dr. Octopus without either of them realizing it, and that again is placing the responsibility on Peter for, like, this. You kind of helped him get to this stage and helped him rush to this point, and it's not until like 2/3 of the way through the game, because Otto will like repeatedly leave Peter messages on his phone where he's like, I've got it, like, Eureka, I've got the thing that's gonna take us beyond. And Peter keeps having these like really positive reactions to it. Like, I hope it goes well. You could bottle and sell that guy's optimism. It's great, Doc, we're gonna do great things. And progressively throughout the game, he starts sounding a little bit scary, where he's talking about, like, unseen forces, or he's just sounding really bitter about Norman. And it takes Peter a little while to catch on. It's like, maybe I shouldn't be encouraging this, and it's too late by the time that he tries to get him to stop. And it's like, that's such a great, like, building Peter's character into the gameplay sections, and it's so smart.
Yeah, these developers and the creators of the game clearly have some love for the Raimi movies, and I think a lot of the Doc Ock stuff, like, by the end of the game, I'm like, okay, you guys clearly love Spider-Man 2, but you're like, what if we made Spider-Man 2 even better?
Yeah, that's what this feels
like. I know Captain Logan and Eric have like a lot of qualms with that movie, and particularly Doc Ock, and how everything that he does after his failed experiment is chalked up to his arms are making him do it. And in this game, they do that, but they make that a lot better. So it's not the arms, it's the neural inhibitor that that allows him to control the arms, and it also, like, it's unlocking, like, it's not filtering out his inhibitions, and it's making him act on, like, his darkest impulses. So it's just bringing out all the worst of Ock.
Yeah, and that plays into what I think are the two biggest themes of the game, and also, which is a great way to transition on to Mr. Negative, which is that both Mr. Negative and Otto have the thing of, like, they're corrupted by their darker impulses, and they have the yin-yang thing going on of, like, the good and the bad and the way that they intersect. And they also have the thing of what I think is this game's other biggest, like, driving idea is learning to be okay with accepting help. And neither of those characters are able to do that. Like, they collaborate with other people, and they collaborate with each other for their goals of, like, making Norman Osborn suffer. But Peter's constantly trying to, like, extend a hand to both of them because they're both, like, people he's close to. And he's trying to help them to do things the right way, and they just refuse. They're like, no, I know what I'm doing. My way is the right way. I don't need you. Stay out of my way. Whereas everyone else, like Peter and Aunt May and Miles and MJ and eventually Silver Sable and Norman, all have to come to this, okay, we really do need your help. I can't do this by myself moment.
Yeah, Mr. Negative, I thought it was a stroke of genius to include him. I haven't talked about the score yet. You know how I am with score, and you know how much I love John Paisano. He did that amazing Daredevil theme that we all know and love, and the score for that show. He did the score for this game. It's so good, and I love the Inner Demons and Mr. Negative score in particular.
Yeah, I was gonna Otto's theme. The theme he becomes Octopus too. It's like, I didn't want to get too onto the score while we were still talking, but whatever, we're on it now. It's so good. Like, everything about it is so good.
it's interesting hearing him talk about it because they worked on the Peter Parker score first, like for his more quiet scenes where he's just Peter Parker, and then they took that and morphed it into what is now for me an iconic Spider-Man theme.
Yeah, I really like this theme.
Like you hear that and it immediately makes me think of like just reading the Ultimate comics for the first time when I was a kid. Like that feels so like authentically Spider-Man, and it's great and I love it. But getting back to Mr. Negative, I love the dichotomy of like him being like a good guy and like having the feast shelter, the homeless shelter, having Aunt May working there, and him being really close with both May and Peter. But then as soon as that power vacuum is left by Fisk, you've got like that. He sees that as his opportunity to go in and like seize control of his gun so he can wage this war on Norman Osborn for what he did to him. And like Brian and Tara talked about how worlds colliding was the big part of the story, what makes any Spider-Man story great, and that's why they had Mr. Negative as the villain. Speaking to that though, if I'm gonna put one of my only gripes with this game out there is that I wish we got to see the dichotomy of that a little more. Like once Peter finds out that Mr. Negative and Martin Lee are in fact the same person, we don't spend a lot of time with that dichotomy. Like he never comes back to the feast shelter after that. He's just Mr. Negative for the rest of the game.
He comes back after you've like invaded his sort of secret office and found out his stuff.
That's what I'm talking about. Like after you find out that he is that he's Mr. Negative, we don't ever see him return back to the feast shelter, and we don't really get that duality anymore. I would have liked
the story played. Can't.
That's true. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I would have liked to have seen that dynamic.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I would have liked to see the Martin side of him come out sometimes later in the game. Yeah.
But that's a minor little quibble.
We have two minor quibbles that are both Mr. Negative related, and like one of them is just unavoidable and not even really a problem. It struck me as just a funny little thing to think about. The one. Well,
I wanted to talk about my other one because it's also.
I'll see if it's one of mine. Anyway,
okay.
Yeah.
Just real quick. Some of his followers, well, pretty much all of his followers seem like loyal to a fault, and there are times when instead of imbuing them with his negative energy, he'll just suck the life force out of them, and I'm like, well, why would they be okay with that? Like, if you're gonna have this like group of loyalists who are like Nazi loyal, like I'd like to have an explanation as so like what their background is. Do they think you're an actual like god? Like what is their mindset, and why are they so loyal to you? And why do you have this massive army?
This is weird, and we'll get into one of the side missions that we talk about later on. The people who get corrupted by Mr. Negative have the like negative visual effect to them.
Yeah.
And I can see being confused because the demons in the masks don't have that. The way that I took it, and I forget what makes me think this, but the way that I got it like implied was that people, if not all of the people in the demon masks were also corrupted, even if they don't have that visual effect to them. What I assumed was happening was like he touched people and brought out like their negativity and got them to work for him as like, do this, we're gonna destroy this guy that I hate. And what that made me question is like, okay, so if at least some of these guys are meant to be people that he took off the street or something, why do they all speak the same language? Why do they not speak English? But maybe
that's exactly why I don't think it's that, and that all those people are actually Chinese or
yeah, a bit unclear.
yeah, all those people are Chinese, and like they're loyalists, and he imbues them with his negative energy. But other
Yeah,
people, like he has, like when you're at the Halloween party and you need information from that scientist, Martin Lee gets to him first and like corrupts him, like full on corrupts him, and you see the negative energy consume him, and then he blows his brains out.
yeah.
But
So
like that,
is there like
none of
partial?
his, but none of his other followers have that.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I don't mean to keep making Mr. Negative the source of all of our negatives, but it's just like the two minor gripes that I have with the story are, one, I would have liked a scene with Martin like we have for Otto as like an epilogue thing, because the last we see of him is him getting knocked out by Otto in the Oscorp building, and then that's it. We don't see or hear from him the rest of the game. I would have liked to see how they're holding him in the raft and just get a little bit of closure on that angle. And also, and this comes back to Norman, Otto, and Martin. And again, this is like the thing that you can't tell this story otherwise, but it's just a funny little contrivance, which is that I think it's maybe a little contrived that as the story unravels, we find out that really it all comes down to the grudge between these three men, between the one incident that Norman was looking for a cure for his wife and Harry. He was using Martin as like a test subject, killed Martin's parents by accident. Otto was like, you shouldn't have done this, I told you to stop. So Otto and Martin have been like corresponding and collaborating for years. It's like, man, Norman sure does suck, right? And then they get together and it's like, we're gonna destroy Norman. And I just think it's kind of funny that Peter doesn't realize that these three men have that connection or know each other at all, and yet he has close personal relationships with all three of them before the story starts. Like, that's just a funny little, like, of course, Peter, by pure coincidence, would have an in with all three of these guys before he even realizes that there's a connection.
Well, that's what helps ground the story and makes it personal.
That's what I'm... There's no other way that you can tell this story. So, of course, I'm not saying they shouldn't have done that. It's just, it's a funny little... Funny how the universe works, ain't it?
Yeah. I do want to talk about MJ really quick.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay, so MJ in this game is played by the beautiful and amazingly talented Laura Bailey, who played Catwoman in the Telltale Batman games.
That was her.
And that is her. And she is incredible. Like, I'm currently reading Rebirth Batman, Tom King's Batman, and Catwoman in that comic, I hear Laura Bailey's voice whenever I read Catwoman's lines.
Yeah.
She is my definitive like voice for Catwoman. And I don't immediately know the other voices like by name to compare her to, but I think she's wonderful. She captures everything I love about that character. And I was super excited when I heard she was going to be Mary Jane. I knew it was going to be a very different thing, but she's so talented. I was just beyond excited to see what she brought to this, and seeing their take on Mary Jane is very interesting. I like that they made her a reporter in this. That she's essentially a Lois Lane. I don't think it's fair to call her an overt ripoff just because she's so different from that character in a myriad of other ways. But they made her a reporter in this so that she could be integral to the story, and like really drive home the themes that they wanted to hit. Partnership. You know, you were talking earlier about how Otto and Lee have this partnership because they have this mutual hatred for Norman. She and Peter eventually form this partnership after being separated for so long, and she's very headstrong. She's a go-getter. She well, in the comics, she's either running a club or just a supermodel. Neither one of those lend themselves to being involved in a superhero story. So the reporter angle just made perfect sense.
Yeah. It especially doesn't lend itself to being involved in like an interactive game where you've already made the decision for story purposes that you're going to let MJ be playable. So you want to give her a more proactive role to be like, okay, how can we get her to the action? How can we have her like contribute to the plot in such a way that it feeds into the idea that like Peter needs her help and she needs Peter's help and they can mutually sort of like work with each other.
And this is where a lot of the little negativity there is for this game, for critical consensus, this is where it all comes from. Because a lot of people complain about the MJ sections and like, oh, I just wanted to play as Spider-Man, I didn't need MJ in my Spider-Man game. My stance on that is this. Me and Captain Logan, I talked to Captain Logan about this on Facebook. He actually thought that a lot of the MJ segments were tedious and narratively intrusive. And I was like, Cap, I gotta say, I vehemently disagree with both of those statements. First of all, I don't think it's narratively intrusive at all. It's all on narrative. Mary Jane is the first one that discovers Devil's Breath, and that's a major plot point that propels us through the rest of the game.
Although, I think that might just be because we know Cap hates flashbacks, and a couple of the MJ sections are flashbacks.
We did talk about that, yeah. But my argument with that, especially with this first one, our first playthrough as MJ, is that we're trying to avoid that thing of giving like us, the player, too much information that our main protagonist doesn't know. Mm-hmm. And so he's just getting to the that art gallery. He doesn't know what happened prior to his arrival.
Right.
So the only way to do that is through a flashback.
Mm-hmm.
So I completely understand that. Especially when we get to the later one where Mary Jane invades a Sable base to get information from a doctor, and you get there as Spider-Man and you see a guy holding a gun at her. From Peter's perspective, he's got to swoop in right then and there and take that guy down. But when we flash back through it as MJ, we see that it's just a doctor, and he's scared and thinks like she's a double disc or the inner demons. But she explains that she's just a reporter. And even though he slightly lowers his gun, I think that's pretty contrived, because once he finds that out, like, why not just put the gun down? But
I think he's paranoid. Like, the little characterization of that guy that we get makes me think that he's just kind of squeamish, and even if it's someone who's relatively harmless, he's just kind of scared for his own safety.
Okay, that's fair. But yeah, like, I think, like, Spider-Man swooping in and stopping that moment immediately, you can understand why MJ is peeved, mm-hmm. because she was getting through to that guy, and she was giving him, he was giving her information that she really needed to know, yeah. And Peter kind of swooped in and stopped that.
You don't want that plot point to happen, and then the player thinks, oh, MJ's being unreasonable.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also, outside of even a story perspective, there's the reasoning that Brian Intihar gives, which is that the reason you have the MJ and Miles sections is that he didn't want the player to constantly be at a 10, he says. He doesn't want sort of like... Because like a story, the gameplay has to have peaks and valleys, you know? So you can't constantly be at a peak where you're super powerful Spider-Man getting things done, getting, like, sort of being amazing all the time. You need a moment where it's like, okay, let's have a bit more lower stakes, more tension, and personally, just me speaking just on an overall statement on those sections, I really enjoyed them. I enjoyed them story-wise, I enjoyed playing through them. I thought they were wonderfully tense for both MJ and Miles. I had no problem with those.
I only have a problem with one of those, but before I get into that, I want to talk a little more about MJ. So, I think performance-wise, she does a wonderful job. I love all the awkward tension between her and Peter, and that scene in the apartment is so lovable and funny and cute, and it's one of my favorite moments in the entire game when he cooks for her, and then he gets that call and he goes to leave as Spider-Man, and she's like, "Did you just leave your clothes on my kitchen floor?" And he's like, and then he just like walks backwards to go get the clothes, and that was all improv by Yuri. Like, he wasn't told to do that on set; he just did it on stage. And I thought that was so great. That was so funny, and it was one of my favorite moments in the game.
Yeah.
And another great moment in the game is, like, I think you've just beaten Martin Lee for the first time after that incredible Grand Central sequence, and you're texting MJ, and like that whole thing felt really modern and like true to life of relationships nowadays, and like there was so much tension in that scene, even though you're just like watching two people text, because like you're hoping that MJ isn't just like, you know what, I'm just gonna give up on this relationship, but like she doesn't, and like it's a great triumphant moment, as great as him taking down a supervillain.
When Peter like, "It's over, by the way," and MJ's like, "It's over? Okay." And I'm at the same time as Peter, I'm going like, "No!
Not that kind of over."
That's so great. It's like, no! But yeah, I guess, also, since we kind of brought him up, all the other, like, next biggest characters, I guess, in the story is Miles. And, I don't know if... I don't think... Was it mentioned that Miles would be playable prior to release? Because I think during our last discussion, I mentioned playable Miles, and you said you didn't think that was gonna happen. And granted, this is not how I expected playable Miles, but we got it, and I really like his role in the story.
Yeah, it wasn't mentioned that he would be a playable character, which I also really like, because the first time you play as him is really emotional and powerful, and it's, again, one of the strongest scenes in the game. I gotta say that they won me over. They won me over on that completely, because this is still very much Peter's story, and Miles is just a part of it.
Yeah. And then
now there's I love that first playthrough as him at the Osborne rally, and I'll get into that. But before that, I just want to knock out real quick my only gripe with the Miles gameplay. So I think right after that, well, not right after that, but the next time you play as Miles, you're just walking down a street after you punch Spider-Man, which that scene was incredible. And we can talk about that if you want to. But right after that, you're walking down a street and evading Sable's forces to get to Feast, and I feel like that's less of a story thing, almost. Yeah, that's the one bit where I feel like this isn't really relevant to the story. You're just introducing the hacking mechanics for a bit later on in the story, which actually is fairly important to the narrative, and that's when he gets the medicine for the Feast Shelter and is evading Rhino. That's that's just like getting the player acclimated to those controls before that. Doesn't really do anything for the story.
Yeah, you gotta. That's one of the few times where they really had to make like a very slight sacrifice for story for the sake of, again, like they said, wanting a balanced gameplay experience. I feel like that's one of those moments you put in there for, okay, we need a little bit of a cool down. We need a bit more of a mellow gameplay section to break up the big high octane Spider-Man bits.
And that wasn't really a problem for me. I understand why they did it, but if you're just looking at like purely story, this is the only point in the game where I will say they sacrifice story for the sake of gameplay, which is understandable and fine. That's the only moment in my eyes, as far as I can tell from the main story, that they did that.
Although, you know what? You could make the argument. That it helps us get more of a feeling for, like, Sable's presence in the city and what that's doing for people. That we show, okay, this is what a normal person has to do if they want to bypass Sable and get where they need to be going on time. Because we keep seeing these Sable outposts all throughout the city, especially as, like, events keep escalating and the breakout at the raft happens. And
after that, like, you're getting shot at constantly by Sable's men as you're just swinging through the city.
Yeah, and so you read on the social media feed, and you keep hearing in JJ's call-in show, people talking about how terrible it is that they have to keep dealing with these Sable outposts. So I guess you could say it does help us feel more of that we actually have to play as someone who has to go through all this stuff just to circumvent one of those outposts. Like, this is how the Sable presence in this city is screwing things up for normal people.
Yeah, that's fair. I can see that. That's a little more like world building, but yeah, that ties into the story. So yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like when we go to that Osborn rally, well, first off, we got to talk about Miles' dad. That mission. Yeah, that mission where like you fight alongside him against the inner demons.
Yeah.
And you stop that truck, and then you have to stop another truck carrying fuel, and one of the demons is like coming at you with a car, and he crashes at it with a cop car to stop him from hitting you.
It's so awesome.
So awesome. So tension fueled, so fun to play, and like
he punches the demon right afterward, and the gun goes off, and you think he got shot for a split second. It's like, no, he's okay. All right.
And that was great. That actor had a lot of charisma, a lot of presence, and
I know a voice from somewhere. I couldn't pinpoint who it is, but I know him from something. Do you know that? Has he been in anything before? That voice actor?
I can look him up while we were talking, but go ahead.
Yeah. Hang on, I'm on the tropes page. Let me see. He's played by Russell Richardson. Let me see what he's been in.
Yep, that's him.
But yeah, he's so good. He's so charming, and the scene at the rally, that is like really genuinely visceral. Like, Brian and Tara mentioned how they wanted that scene to be really sort of like tasteful, and not to make anyone feel too like bad or have any, like flashbacks or anything. And it is, but it's that's an affecting moment. Like, that's the pivot point, because it comes right after the big sequence that was shown off at E3 last year with the QuickTime event and the stopping the helicopter, and that's such a great, like, visually, feeling wise, like gameplay wise, it's a fun, great, big, cinematic, triumphant Spider-Man moment. And then you go to this rally where it's like, all right, we just took down the demons. We're gonna celebrate with our new pal, Officer Davis. He's a great guy. He's gonna get rewarded. And then the story turns, and then we get a bit darker, and it starts with this really brutal act of domestic terrorism that they just play completely straight. And it's such a that Miles sequence is so that hurts.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I rarely do this, especially after playing The Last of Us. But I jumped when like you're crawling through the wrecked car and a dead body falls out of the driver's seat, I think it is.
That's terrible.
Yeah, and then you see a poor guy get gutted right next to you right after that.
Yeah, it's like you feel bad for Miles even before he finds out his dad is dead. Like, this kid's gonna have scars just from going through this experience.
And yeah, you see right away that he's quick on his feet and he's smart. Like when his mom gets trapped, he finds that pipe and uses it for leverage.
Mm-hmm.
And you see right away that this there's something in Miles to where like he's got that heroic quality, like to charge into danger like that. Like when you know that there are these like deadly like assassin like cult people around with like these magical swords and guns, like like the average 15-year-old, would he really do that even if it was his dad?
And if he would, it could be so easy to come off as like a dumb kid, doesn't realize the danger of the situation and is just going in half-cocked thing. But because of the relationship that he has with his dad, and like the way that we can tell just based on one conversation how his dad informs him as a person, where he's like, maybe I'm a superhero, maybe I'm just a guy who doesn't give up. Like, that tells you Miles isn't going in there because he's stupid and doesn't realize how dangerous it is. He's going in there because he's a genuinely brave person who's like willing to take that risk.
Yeah, and he thinks stuff out. Like as soon as you get from under the car, you're walking, and Miles says before you even get to a certain point, it's not safe to go yet. Like he's thinking throughout that whole scene of like how he's going to maneuver to get to his dad.
And again, balance of gameplay and characterization where that's obviously a warning for the player, as it is also informing this character.
Yeah, and there's so many great little things like that they do throughout this game that like they do both, and I think that's great.
Yeah, and just the whole thing, the way that connects Miles and Peter and their sort of like relationship, where Peter has the chance to be, for Miles, the mentor that he wanted Otto to be for him, and to a lesser extent Martin, and in a tangential way even Norman, where it's like, it's kind of sad that Peter keeps having these father figures in his life after Uncle Ben who keep letting him down. Like, Norman is preoccupied with other things and is really like laser focused on Harry and that sort of thing, to the like detriment of everyone else. Otto gets consumed by his hatred, Martin gets consumed by his hatred. Everyone keeps like having these opportunities to be for Peter what Uncle Ben was, and they keep letting him down. And the story ends like the after credit scene of like Miles has discovered his spider powers, and now Peter really has a chance to be the Uncle Ben figure for someone, and he's not gonna let Miles down. And it's such a great, like, that's another great, powerful moment to end the story of the game on.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I want to talk about Silver Sable really quick. I don't know the voice actress for her.
Hang on. Let me pull it up right here.
Okay. While you're doing that, I think she was also a really pleasant surprise, because we did get a look at her in a few of the trailers, so we knew she was going to be in the game. But I would have thought she would for sure be someone that you fight and wouldn't have a lot to her. She'd just kind of be an assassin lady that you'd have to fight like she is in most of the comics. We do some interesting stuff with her in Hammerhead and Spectacular.
Yeah.
Where like there used to be like a couple, but I wasn't expecting that for this game. I thought she'd be just another person you have to fight.
Yeah.
They pleasantly subverted my expectations with that, especially towards the end, where like that Mr. Negative is going after Norman in this building, and like you're about to open the door, and then she shoots at you and stops you, and like Spider-Man like reasons with her and talks her down, and like they team up. But I thought, like, the second that she stopped me, I thought, okay, here's our obligatory like boss fight. I'm gonna have to fight her, and then I'm gonna have to fight Mr. Negative.
Yeah. And she's played by. I'm reading this from the Tropes page. She's played by Nicole Elise, and it's weird because they have her in the character listings under villains, and I would not put her there because even though Sable, the organization, very much is kind of a villainous presence, like they're locking people up for no reason, stealing their stuff. You get the idea just from how she acts and the way that Peter describes her in the character bios, that like of all of them, Sablinova herself is the one who's got like a moral compass to her, like from the very beginning. And in the end, it doesn't feel as forced as it could have. It's like, look, your client's gonna die, you gotta let me help. And then the next time we see her, she comes in and she realizes that like Peter has no, or like Spider-Man has no personal stake in keeping her client alive, and yet he took this huge beating for his safety as far as she knows. And that like completely turns her around as like, no, okay, you're right. You know what? You're a good person. We've just had our differences. I've got to go and think about things. Whereas her organization is like, I don't care. We just want profits.
Yeah, like they're still getting paid, and I like that. Like you still get to have them as villains, or like as opponents to fight, and I like that. Like the inner demons are nothing to sneeze at in this game, gameplay wise. But I think Sable's guys are arguably the toughest people that you have to fight in the game.
Yeah, just as regular go.
Because you like, for a lot of them are armored, and like none of your, well, a good bit of your web attacks don't work on them because they're armored.
Yeah, like the Sable bases gave me the most challenge, but those were really fun.
Yeah, I would agree. Same.
And it's like, I keep defaulting that because, of course, this is a game. I keep defaulting to talking about the gameplay stuff. Such a good, like, difficulty. Like, I played it on the standard amazing difficulty, and it's like, it's such a nice balance of, like, you'll die a few times, but it'll never feel cheap. Like, any time that I died in this game, I felt like it was because of a mistake on my part, where it's like, it's difficult, but it's not unfair, ever.
Yeah, I very rarely died, and I also played it on, I'm not gonna lie, the first time I played it on friendly, because I just wanted to blow through the story and experience it. And then the second time I played it on standard, and I honestly didn't notice the difference because I would rarely die. Yeah, I think I died all of twice playing this game.
I can't total deaths at like 4 or 5.
And the first time I died, it was just because I was looking for a backpack and I didn't see the train coming towards me while I was on the train tracks.
I was on top of the train and I didn't realize we were going to an overpass, and I just hit the overpass.
That's funny. And like when, by the end of the story, when like she leaves, and she says, "I will miss you and your bizarre witticisms," I laughed so hard at that.
Yeah.
I think that's another one of the funniest lines in the game because she plays it so straight, and like she doesn't have a sense of humor really, but she appreciates Spider-Man's like secretly, and she's like, "I will miss you and your bizarre witticisms, Spider-Man, until we meet again," and I was just dying.
Yeah, and it's like it's weird to then go back and look at their interactions and being like, whenever Spider-Man's getting all quippy, it's like, she's secretly enjoying this. But yeah, I guess before we talk about who I really want to talk about, which is just the whole gang of the Sinister Six, we should also definitely talk about Norman. And I don't know, like, the thing that I always go back to and that I appreciate, and the reason that I think, now that I think about it, that people were kind of shocked to hear that Venom wasn't going to be any part of this game, or the Black Suit, is that you look at Spider-Man's mythos and, like, the way that people generally perceive the mythos. And part of this, I think, might be because of the Raimi movies, but I think the Raimi movies ended up the way that they were because this was already the case, is that you have Dr. Octopus, you have Green Goblin, and you have Venom, and those are like the three big, personal to Peter, like, if you want to tell an epic Spider-Man story, you factor one of them in, and all of Peter's other rogues gallery are to varying degrees just guys who are superpowered criminals. And that's not the way it always is, but that's the way it's kind of seen. So I think not knowing, but like finding out that Octopus is the main villain of the game and that Norman is such a giant part, it almost feels like something is missing to not have the symbiote be a factor at all until the very end post-credit scene. But I like the way that they handled it, and it's just such a... This is definitely like a unique take on Norman, I think, as far as like he really does love his son, and that's the reason for everything he does. Like, you look back and he's not really a jerk, he's just so tunnel vision. Is like, my son's gonna die, I need this cure, Otto, I don't care about your feelings, I don't care about anything else, I gotta get this stuff done. And it's the most sympathetic version of Norman that I think we have.
Yeah, well, actually, yeah. I think I would agree with that. And it's weird, but so interesting to think that in this version of Spider-Man's mythos and continuity in like all these 8 years, Norman was just Norman and has never become the Goblin.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's so weird to have this be like a definitive take on the mythos when Peter hasn't fought his three big defining arch enemies at all in his 8-year career. Like, by the beginning of the game, he hasn't fought Octopus, he hasn't fought Goblin, and he hasn't fought Venom. Those are the three guys you think of when you think Spider-Man villains, and they haven't shown up yet.
Yeah. It'll be interesting if we get a sequel to see if that really is the symbiote thing, or if Harry will eventually become a Goblin, because I think you could really take that either way. It's vague enough to where you could take that either way. Yeah, Norman's just Norman in this game, and like he is kind of a vindictive, for lack of a better word, asshole. Sorry for cursing on your channel.
Don't worry about it.
Like he takes the grant away from Octavius just because he can. Like, he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
Like in an attempt to get him to come back to Oscorp, he didn't have to do that. He could have just left them alone and let them continue their research. But
I think maybe is Norman maybe thinking, I had Otto for these experiments the first time, I might need him. I need him to work for me because his intellect could be of use to me finding this cure.
Well, I don't think that's really what it is, because
I don't think
Otto turns him down, like, evidently, and he's not taken aback by that or like trying to push Otto further to just come back to Oscorp.
Yeah,
like,
but I think
he's fine with he's fine with Octavius just like stewing in his juices and like being mad that Osborn took his funding away. But he doesn't seem like overly eager to have him back at Oscorp. He puts that on the table because that only works out well for him, but like he doesn't seem overly eager to have him back.
Yeah, it's just that might inform that, and also offering it to Peter is like, now we have like a real like personal reason that Norman is invested in is like why he's constantly trying to further his science division. It's like they're working on this one thing that he's been obsessed with for years.
Yeah, Devil's Breath.
And also, I love the one little thing in the social media that's like, is it me or does it always look like Norman Osborn's dressed up for St. Patrick's Day? I'm like, I'm so glad you put that in the game. I thought it was just me. Like, his outfit is kind of ridiculous.
This is okay. As far as rounding out characters, we should definitely talk about Aunt May. I want to save any talk of her death for the end when we talk about the ending of the story.
Yeah.
But just like she's acting. Oh, go ahead, Nick. I'll let you go first.
No, it's just I was just gonna say that I don't have too much to say about her as a character in her own right, that I don't have to say about like other versions of Aunt May. Like, it's really cool that she's running Feast, but she's the same like super lovable, like can do no wrong woman, and like why would you do this to her, Omniac?
Yeah, and I think they give her just enough scenes and like her talking to you while you're swinging through like phone calls that like you feel it at the end, and we'll get there. But I think we don't do this for every character in the game, but I thought it was really cool that they modeled the voice actress playing Aunt May at like that's Aunt May, like the voice actress that you hear, like that's like what she looks like in real life
with the hairstyle.
Yeah, with the hair and everything, like she looks exactly like the voice actress playing her.
And also, just talking about her and Feast, because this isn't really related to any of the side stuff that we'll eventually get to. The one or two or three people that you like talk to at Feast who have like kind of their own stories going on, like Cam and the lady that he plays chess with, where like we established that she has a thing with her daughter and she doesn't want to move in because she doesn't want to, like, they have a sort of strained relationship. And then after the end of the game, we find out that Eileen is her name. She did eventually move in with their daughter after the whole Devil's Breath fiasco. And Cam is going to move over to where she is so that they can keep playing the chess game. And like the lady that you saved at the beginning, Gloria, who's like, I don't want handouts. And it's like, head over to Feast. They have the best wheat cakes. Like, my mom used to make wheat cakes. I haven't had those in a long time. You can talk to her throughout the game, and it's like she'll get a job. She'll become a manager at her workplace eventually. It's like, I love that. I love that because it gives more weight to both May and Martin Lee, that there are actually people that you can interact with who, because they were staying at this Feast shelter, are actually having their lives improved. And so it's like, it's not just a place that you go to like further plot stuff or talk to one of them when you need to. It's like, this feels like a real lived-in place as much as any other part of the city does.
And yeah, I love that, because it, like, when you're there, you're Peter Parker, and it makes those segments like important. Like, you can go around, explore, talk to people, and as you said, like they really flesh that out, and it adds to the world building. It makes it feel like a real place. Insomniac really thought hard with all this stuff.
Yeah.
It took them 3 years to make this game, and you can see why. There's so much. You can see the sweat and the tears and the love and the passion through every single scene and every interaction.
Okay, so just the discussion about the big bad boys themselves, the Sinister Six, and also maybe Shocker, if you have anything to say about Shocker. Just because, like I mentioned earlier, outside of Octopus and Venom and Osborn, the general perception of Spidey's Rogues Gallery is that they're mainly just there because they're cool, colorful characters for him to fight, and their motivations can be pretty simple. And I feel like that's kind of the way that we implemented them here, where you get just enough of them to tell like what their character is, and their motivations are all different and interesting. Like Shocker is just kind of a weirdo who wants to become pure energy. And then not
Electro.
Yeah, Electro. Like Electro's just kind of a weirdo who wants to make himself pure energy. And he's the one played by Josh Keaton. And it's great because he and Peter have this kind of rapport where like he's the one villain who like will joke around with Spider-Man and get Spider-Man's jokes and is kind of just cool and casual with him, and that's a great dynamic. And then you have Rhino who's just like, I just want to get out of the dumb suit. Like, why can't you just let me get out of the suit? It's terrible. And like you read the character bio and you find out like you think that he'd want to get out of the suit just because it's inconvenient for him, or he's just kind of sick of being that way. No, the reason he wants to get out of the suit is because he's sick of people making fun of him because he looks like a rhinoceros.
That's hilarious.
And Scorpion is a psychopath who just wants to get rid of his debts, and Vulture, he's got cancer because of his wingsuit. And it's like, it's hard not to sympathize with some of these guys, and they're just, for as minor of a role that they ultimately have, and that they're just like the muscle to the real bad guys who are Otto and to a lesser extent Martin, they leave an impression, and you're glad that they're there, and they're fun to have around.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We do have a good bit of Spidey's Rogues Gallery in the comics who are literally just there to be fun, colorful characters for him to fight, and that's fine. Like talking about like not getting my own individual thoughts on the villains out. Shocker is awesome because they basically do with Shocker what Brian Michael Bendis does in Ultimates with Shocker. Where like we'll kick off a story with Spider-Man just beating the crap out of Shocker and then going like Shocker is like in this game what he is in the Ultimate comics, and like in Spectacular Spider-Man it was kind of Sandman in the beginning. It was Flint Marko where he would like just beat up, but like he was kind of like bullying and like picking on Flint Marko to an extent, and like the same thing. Yeah. The same thing with Shocker in the Ultimate comics and in this game. Like they have like a rapport thing. Like he shows up, beats the crap out of Shocker, humiliates him, makes fun of him, like rinse repeat. We do that so much. It's like a running gag, and it is absolutely hilarious.
And like Spidey's to everyone in his quips, but he's really mean to Shocker. He's like, Herman, I know you don't have feelings, but it's like...
It's just the funniest thing. It's like, come on, Herman. If we're gonna make this interesting, you gotta at least talk to me.
He's like, when I was young and stupid, and you were just stupid. And yeah, I guess, I don't know, this is kind of a, I don't know, it's just because they also are, like, members of the Rogues Gallery, and we were gonna transition to, like, side stuff eventually. Let's talk about, like, the three sort of side mission villains that we have, which are, Tombstone, Taskmaster, and I cannot believe, I was shocked, like, genuinely surprised to find out that Screwball was in this game.
Wow.
Like, you did the Screwball mission, right?
I have not done it.
Oh, wow, okay. So, like, you're familiar with Screwball?
A little, yeah.
The reason I was so surprised is because she's a relatively new character, and I just found out about her, like, very recently through the new Disney cartoon that started last year. So, like, the thing with Screwball, for those who don't know, is, like, from what I know of her in the comics and in the Disney cartoon, is that her thing is that she's, like, an internet personality who likes to prank authority figures, and she's sort of got her heart in the right place. Like, she'll pull pranks on, like, corrupt politicians and businessmen, but they start to get maybe a little bit dangerous, and Spider-Man tries to stop her, and he gets pranked in the process, and then she decides, oh, you know what? Pranking Spider-Man just gets me a lot of views and attention. I'm just gonna forget what my initial cause was and just focus on pranking Spider-Man. And like that's the thing with her episode in the animated series. And in this one, they kind of take her and make her a crazy, dangerous psychopath. Where like her mission is that she stages a kidnapping and makes Spidey like jump through all of these hoops while she films it and like streams about it just for like clicks and views. And it's like we took this kind of harmless like goofball character and made her genuinely kind of scary, where like she has fans who are criminals who will just do whatever she wants and be incited to violence. And like at the end of her mission, it turns out there wasn't even a real kidnapping. She just set up the whole thing just to get attention. And like she set up real bombs in people's apartments and stuff. So she's genuinely kind of scary and unhinged. And I think that's a new take for her for this game. And it was really interesting. And like at the end, she didn't actually do anything violent. So she gets off kind of scot-free is the implication, that she doesn't actually get any jail time. So it's like, that's really interesting to me. It's like how we handled her.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to that part, so I can't speak to that. But as far as the other villains go,
You gotta find that. It's really fun.
okay, I did finish the Tombstone mission. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I thought that voice actor had presence. And
Like it's a new,
go ahead.
again, it's a new take on that character, where it's like I'm used to him being sort of a in control businessman type guy who's a very like will only fight if he absolutely has to. But here it's this guy who's like, I just live for the challenge. Like whatever, man. Like again, he's like Shocker in that he and Spider-Man have a real rapport where it's like, yeah, all right, you know what, fine. I don't want to kill Spider-Man. Like him and me, we fight each other. It's fun. I like fighting.
Yeah, it was a very cool and new interesting take. Because like you said, like in the comics and in Spectacular, he's more of a Wilson Fisk type. Only he's a lot better at keeping his emotions in check.
Mm. Yeah, he's like the guy that Wilson Fisk puts on a show of being. That's actually who Tombstone is.
Yeah. Taskmaster, it's interesting because like he's a side boss, but I'd argue he's kind of the toughest boss in the whole game.
Yeah, okay. I could have mentioned this. During the Sinister Six fight, particularly the Rhino and Scorpion boss, I cheesed that fight so hard because I set my suit power to the spider drone, and I kept activating like the drones that like, so you have the one drone that shoots electricity and the other drones that you can just shoot out that'll just shoot little laser blasts. I just kept doing those, and I like beat Rhino and Scorpion in a couple minutes. I tried doing that with Taskmaster, didn't work.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work. Yeah, he's the toughest boss in the game. But yeah, like Rhino, it's an interesting take they decided to do with Rhino because he is both like the classic like 616 like super strong guy in a suit, but it's also like a robotic like mechanized suit like it is in the Ultimate Comics. They kind of like merged the two. Like in the comics, it's just a regular dude in a giant mech suit. Well, in the Ultimate Comics anyway.
Yeah.
And they kind of like merge those together.
Like the way that they did amazing film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they merged that together. And that was really cool. Electro, they decided to give him a much more like modern look instead of like the silly like starfish costume, which was cool. And I like that they still did a nod to it, because if you look at the
Star.
scarring on his face, it's in the shape of a starfish.
Yeah. It's like the scars are where the piece would be. And yeah, it's such a great, like they made, again, I keep coming back to the word balance. Like they made all the right decisions to balance, like, okay, we've decided who and what this story is about. This is a story about Otto Octavius, Martin Lee, Norman Osborn. They're the driving factors of this story, and we're not going to distract from that by feeling like we have to make this a Spider-Man story where every bad guy is the bad guy. So everyone else is added there to taste, and this is a Mr. Negative, Dr. Octopus story.
Yeah. I kind of want to talk about a few like key set piece moments, and then I guess we can transition to the ending. But before all that, I just want to finish talking about the villains really quick. So, so with Vulture, he kind of is one of those characters in the comics anyway that, you know, nothing interesting was ever really done with him. We don't get a compelling Vulture, I would argue, until Homecoming. Like, Homecoming was the first thing ever that really made him an interesting character.
Yeah, I can't give him anything, but he's the first villain Peter fights, so he's a very bare bones, wants revenge type guy.
And like the cancer thing makes him sympathetic enough, and I like that. And I do like that. Like we gave them all a motivation. Like again, like Electro wants to become pure energy, like he is in the Ultimate Comics.
Mm-hmm.
Rhino wants to get out of his mech suit. Vulture wants a cure for his cancer that's a result of him wearing the suit. And who would I leave out?
Scorpion.
Yeah, Scorpion. Scorpion's just
That's
yeah. So yeah, like they all have their own motivations, and they're all really like I don't care for Scorpion's design, but I like everybody else's design, and they're all like super fun to fight.
It took me a while to get used to Scorpion's helmet. That's the only part of his design I've acclimated to it.
Yeah, that helmet's not the best. But yeah, they're all fun. They're all really fun to fight, and aside from Scorpion, aesthetically, I like how they all look.
Yeah, like the only like decently well-known Spider-Man villains who I think I'm missing are Kraven and Chameleon, and I can't really see how you implement them.
Well, I like that they don't try to throw everything, but the kitchen sink into this game. Like they hint at Mysterio, and they hint at Lizard in that party, and you even get like backpacks items relating to both those characters. But
oh my god, I can't believe it. The Sandman. Tell me you found the Sandman backpack.
Yeah.
I cannot believe Peter, you just left Sandman trapped inside of a vial in a backpack for years on the side of Avengers Tower. What's wrong with you? The Sandman in this continuity better have been like a complete monster, or else like you just forgot you had someone in there for years.
He's like, it's the same as prison. He'll be all right.
It's like, do you think Tony or Steve or anyone like looked out to the side of the building and was like accidentally took that down and let Sandman out?
Yeah, I want to save that stuff for the side missions, but I do love all the Easter eggs. So, like getting back to our main villains, with Otto, I think that he's that actor is phenomenal. I love what they did with him, and Oh, an interesting thing to note. They spent more. Well, not spent more. They added more like polygons, I think it is, to his character. Like they spent the most time villain wise, like crafting Otto. Like they put the most detail into Otto to make sure that
Vent.
yeah, they made sure they put the most detail into Otto because his scenes with Peter, especially by the end, are so important and impactful, and you want like the performances to come through. And also, like it's raining, and you can like see the detail and like the rain as it's dripping down both their faces, and it's great.
Yeah, dude, the freaking the performances faces from Otto and Peter in their scenes together are some of the best acting. Like just whenever it's Otto and Peter alone together, you can guarantee that they will just give such a great acting performance, even just through their faces. Like it is some really, really good motion capture.
Um, yeah. What did you think of Devil's Breath as like our big like MacGuffin like plot device?
I didn't really have any strong feelings on it until we find out what it's for. Like, I really like the scene where you sneak into Oscorp and you learn what it is, and like they give you that live action photo of like all the dead rats, where it's like, oh no, this is a big deal. Like, this is horrifying. And then you realize it was supposed to be a cure for Harry, and you find out what the deal with Harry is, and you're like, oh, and suddenly it's this really interesting thing of Norman and like tying it to Otto and Martin and like everything. Like we say that the events of this game spiraled out from taking down Fisk. Really, it all spiraled out from the creation of this thing and from the disease that Emily and Harry had. And all, like, without that moment, like, yeah, sure, Spider-Man takes down Wilson Fisk, and his life gets infinitely easier. But because of this disease and all of the stuff that happened because of that, the entire story of this game just, that's a really good reveal. And, like, that's another moment of, like, I feel like playing as MJ as opposed to Peter enhances that moment, where it's like, you're walking through Norman's place and there's sable guards everywhere and it's so tense, and that's just adding on to the feeling of like, what's going on? Harry is sick? What? This happened? Oh my gosh.
And that's such a great scene. And like I think when MJ jumps off of that building, it cements the arc that she and Peter have had throughout the game. Because you start the game off and she is she's very headstrong, and she's not having any of Peter's like trying to keep her safe and like, I'm not a damsel in distress, I can take care of myself. But she does like reach that point where she's like, okay, I need to be reasonable. There are some things I simply cannot do, and like I want to do what I can to like help the city and save the city, and like me and Peter were going to work together. I'm going to do what I can, and then Peter will come in and do what he does. And that's her accepting, like, that's her, like, doing her thing, like, sneaking in there and getting that information. But when she jumps off of that ledge, that's her saying, you know what, like, it's your turn. Like, we're partners. I accept what you do because you trusted me enough to do what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's her accepting help again.
Yeah, and that's a really strong moment, and I think it cements the fact that they more than likely will get back together by the end of the game.
Yeah.
So
now I guess the plot goes, you know, the big one.
I do want to get into the ending, but before that, I just want to mention there's so many great set pieces in this game, but I think my favorite is the Grand Central like terminal sequence. That whole sequence where like you start off as MJ, and like you have to sneak around, and like you're having Peter, like letting Peter know exactly when he should take a guy out. I thought that was really cool. Like seeing that from her perspective, like seeing like Spider-Man like come in and web up people and like take them to the ceiling. I thought all that was really, really cool.
Yeah, that's actually a moment, and like you see him like in the corner of your eye, like crawling around and stuff. It's really nice. This is probably gonna be the cliche choice, but my favorite sequence is the one that was shown off at E3. Like playing through that gave me such a new appreciation for it, where it's like everything from getting to the Fisk construction site up through stopping that helicopter. It's such a like a non-stop like fun thing. It's like that's the part of the game I'm most looking forward to replaying when I do it again, is that entire like 10-20 minute sequence.
And speaking to that sequence, I think it's really fun, like how they chose to market that, because when you look at what they showed at E3, one of the guys in the helicopter is Martin Lee, and when you play that bit in the game, it's just two demons, and Martin Lee isn't there yet, so you don't even know. Well, Peter doesn't know that Martin Lee is Mr. Negative yet at that point.
Yeah.
So I thought that was great. But getting back to the Grand Central scene, like once you help defuse the bomb, and then you play as Spider-Man, and you fight Martin Lee through trains.
Yeah.
Like that whole thing was like so cinematic and so cool, and like you're dodging his hits. And then once you finally beat Martin Lee, and you have to stop the train, and they do the nod to the train sequence in Spider-Man 2 when he stops the train. But it doesn't even work, and Spider-Man is like, that worked last time? I lost my mind. I had to pause the game and I started cheering. I was like, yes! I could not believe that they referenced that. That was so cool. I geeked out so hard at that I had to pause the game. But yeah, and then he stops it a completely different way. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of really great set pieces in this game, but that has to be my favorite. So going to getting towards the end of this game, when Otto releases Devil's Breath, and later you see like that it's infected Aunt May, and she's coughing up blood. At that moment, I knew like she's going to die. Like I was thinking, Insomniac has made so many bold choices at this point, like into the story. The second I saw that blood, like that she coughed up, I'm like, they're going to kill her. It's like, wow, that's going to happen. And then
I assumed until the scene where it happened, man. They got me good.
Oh, that they got you? Well,
like there's even a moment. Like my favorite bit about that whole thing is when Peter's next to her and she starts coughing, and he just stands up and gets the thing and is about to put it in, and for a split second I think he's gonna do it, and then it just pans up to his face and he's shaking and struggling and he can't do it, and he puts it down. That's such a powerful moment.
Well, I knew that he would, because that's not Peter Parker, at least not quintessential Peter Parker. And like as soon as Aunt May is like Peter says, I don't know what to do, because it's a choice between either giving her the cure immediately or like manufacturing enough to save the whole city, and he can't do both. And like he's like, I don't know what to do, and she's like, yes, you do. You know exactly what you have to do. And like I knew he wouldn't do it, and it was so heartbreaking.
That's just a rough.
But that whole lead up where like you make your own suit to counteract Doc Ock suit. That suit is so cool. I played as that a lot, like even after I finished the main story, because it looks so cool, and that's a really great and well constructed boss battle. And like when I finished that whole bit, I was like, they also clearly like Amazing Spider-Man 2, and they were like, how can we make that third act that doesn't really work?
Yeah.
There is the fight on top of the Osborn Tower that both me and Cap complained about. And
Well, that's
what's up?
the first Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's what I said.
You said 2.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean the first one. Like they did that fight so much better. Like, obviously story context is different, but yeah, like we do the fight, like the big final fight on top of the Osborn Tower, and it works a lot better for the story that they told. And
yeah,
it
over.
Like all the moves that you're doing against Otto and like his attacks, it was all really cinematic and really cool. Especially when they do another nod to Spider-Man 2, and like you spend that last bit fighting him down the side of the building. That looked so cool in cinematic that was mind blowing. His tentacles and fighting down the side of the building. Because right before you guys end up on the side of the building, he crushes your web shooters, so you don't have those anymore, and it's just you dodging his tentacles and getting in some hits, and like doing like a kick flip off of him in slow-mo, and it looked incredible.
Yeah. They get rid of all the UI stuff. Like they move, like everything is out of the way. It's just you and him. Like there's nothing to distract you, and it's kind of a perfect climax.
And then you, like, once you've knocked him down, like inside of the building, and you've got the cure, the anti-serum, and you guys like that conversation that they have is so powerful.
Yeah, that's like that almost makes me cry. Aunt May almost makes me cry, but that's a close second. Like, dude, that's just rough. And like the perfect, I forget which video it was, where it's like you can tell Peter's trying to buy into what he's saying when he's like, men like us have a responsibility to do what's best for people. And then Otto shoots himself in the foot where we have to look out for those beneath us. And that's when he loses Peter, and where he loses the player, and it's like, no, dude, you're too far gone. It's just, the neural interface is gone, but there's still that thing in you that says I'm better than everyone else, or I deserve more than everyone else. And when Peter leaves, and Otto's like, my favorite bit is when Peter's about to leave the first time, and Otto's like, you're right, it was the interface, that wasn't me. And Peter just makes this face of like, god damn it, I can't leave, but I just want to be gone. And right before he turns around, it's like, it's such a pain to look. It's like, that's so great. The performances are so great, this whole thing is so perfect.
And at the beginning of the game, when he like sees your costume, and he's like, oh, if you're like his suit crafter, it makes sense that you become a target too. I'm like, really? Really think he just crafts suits? And then, like, they reveal at the end, no, of course he knew that Peter was actually Spider-Man. He was just, putting on a front. And, like, that moment in the middle of the fight where he gashes Peter's costume and reveals that he knew, it's like, Peter's like, you knew? Like, he's so, like, taken aback because Ock has done all this stuff, like, unleashed this awful, like, virus that was supposed to be a cure on the city. He knows Peter's aunt is in the city. Like he knows Peter. Like you know, this could potentially like hurt the people in Peter's life, and like he didn't care.
Yeah.
And that's when he just loses it, goes off on it.
There's also just like the unspoken element of you ruined almost a decade worth of Peter's work. Like, Peter nearly died hundreds and hundreds of times over getting these criminals inside of the raft, and you just ruined all of that by letting them all out.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't go touched on, but that's also an element of like, if at
Well,
that
even
point,
well after you finish the game, you're still having to clean up the mess that Otto left by taking down all the criminals that got out.
yeah, where it's like Spidey put most of those guys in there, and Peter's like, you say you thought of him as a son. He spent years of his life on this like endeavor, and you just reversed it in a day for your own ends.
Yeah, which is also another really great set piece. And I knew, well, I didn't know, but like that was also the most recent E3. They showed that whole scene at the raft, except you didn't see, like they cut it right before Otto shows up, and
Yeah, they're like you, and like, did you? I heard in an interview Brian Intihar mention that was like a last minute decision, like the day of or the day before that got released, they were going to have you see Otto.
well, no,
But
they were going to have
they
it
were
cut.
going to cut to black, and you would hear.
Yeah, you would just hear his voice.
Yeah, and it's like it was a last minute decision that day to be like, no, just cut that part out, just end it with the you.
And like it made me like so interested to see like who's this gonna be. And like it had been far enough away from when Otto put on the interface again, even against Peter's protest, that I wasn't thinking Otto in that scene. But then you see that mechanical arm come out and like clamp down on Peter's wrist, and you're like, oh snap.
I was thinking that we have like a little bit more of a transition, like at the end of that scene where he turns the interface back on, like clearly he's still angry at Norman, but I didn't think the next time we saw him he would be like willing to beat up Peter and throw him into the ocean. And that just goes to show you like how serious he is.
Oh yeah, because the last time we saw him, yeah, he puts the interface back on. He sees Osborn talking on the TV, and he's like a liar, and then he crushes the TV, and he's like, "You have no idea what you're in for."
Yeah, it's like he's like, that guy is so great. His performance is so perfect because he can play at the end when he has to play like really pathetic and kind of pitiful, and he can play like this really nice guy that you just want Peter to have a good relationship with, and then he can play totally terrifying and oh my gosh, I don't want to be in a room with this person.
Yeah, William Silers is his name.
Yeah, Salier.
Saliers. He did a phenomenal job with his rendition of Otto Octavius.
Yeah.
Definitely one of the highlights of the game. And speaking a little more about the Mr. Negative stuff, the visual stuff of like when he grabs you and like you're teleported, like I guess in his mind or maybe a parallel dimension, whatever it's supposed to be, that like all like the black and white like misty imagery, all that stuff was really cool. Like whenever he you were like in another dimension and like having to fight him, I thought that all that stuff was like really visually dynamic and really interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so we've covered most of the main stuff, and we have already, surprisingly, like we're reaching or have gone over the 2-hour mark.
Are
so
you
let's...
serious?
Yep. We
That's
started at like 2:30, 2:40. It's 4:48.
that's crazy. Okay, well, let's do a quick wrap up with the side missions. But before that, I just want to say that I I love the story of the game, and I love the Easter eggs, or the post credit scenes at the end of Miles revealing that he got his powers to Peter, and as well as hinting at there's more in store with Harry and Norman. And I absolutely love that they got Stan Lee to do a cameo in this game.
Yeah. So great. You know
So,
what?
yeah.
I wonder if maybe I'm just remembering this wrong, or if maybe you have to do something to make that cameo happen. Because I've seen playthroughs where the scene that he cameos in happens, and like Peter leaves the restaurant, and MJ looks after him, and then the scene cuts to black before the cameo. And I'm like, why does that happen?
Yeah, that's strange. It's never done that with any of my playthroughs.
Yeah, maybe you have to do something in gameplay to make him show up. I'm not sure.
So, you wanted to talk about side stuff.
Yeah, we brought up, like, I was gonna bring up Tombstone and Taskmaster and Screwball and side stuff, but we talked about them already. We talked about the horrifying Sandman thing, but just in general, I love the backpacks. Like, we talk about how JJ informs, like, the world building. So much of the world building that I really appreciate, and particularly, like, building Peter's career, where it feels like, yeah, this has been, like, in 8 years of him being Spider-Man is in the backpacks, and, like, old material, old villain, like, outfits, old gear that he used to have but doesn't use anymore. Just, like, old stuff from his high school days, like an old broken calculator from when he was a dumpster diver.
The menu from MJ's first date, his first date with MJ.
Yeah, his old web shooters, one of his broken lenses. I think it was Vulture that broke it, I think. But, like, I love how each of those things has just a little 2-sentence story to go with it. And it, like, informs so much, and it's great.
Yeah. The brass knuckles that Fisk used on him. The crushed boutonniere, I think it is, that he had when he fought Fisk one time, and it was during prom.
Oh, yeah. And MJ mentions, I think it's connected to one of them, where, like, he got seriously injured fighting Fisk for the first time, and he ended up...
It's in the art gallery when she's looking at one of the swords, and she talks about how Fisk cut him up, like, really bad with that sword the first time they fought, and he showed up stumbling in her backyard, and she had to steal her dad's car and drive him to the ER.
Yeah, that was good. And it's just so much work put into, like, building the history of this, like, mythology. And it's so well done. And, like, Avengers Tower, obviously. This is another weird thing. I recall someone saying that the Avengers theme occasionally plays if you visit the tower, but that's never happened to me yet, so maybe that was just something I misheard. I don't know.
I doubt that. Maybe it sounds, like, vaguely reminiscent of that, but it's not. It can't be that exact theme. All the theme is original for this game and is done by John Pisano.
Yeah. So there's that. There's the Sanctum Sanctorum, where it's like, I always feel like something strange is happening in there. It's like, I see you, Peter. I see what you're getting at. Captain Logan posted on Facebook and Twitter, Josie's is a landmark you can visit, and so is an embassy for Wakanda.
And
So,
he
like,
makes
so
a
many
hilarious...
great, so much great.
Yeah, like, Spider-Man makes a hilarious joke about that. I can't remember what it is, but he says something really funny about Wakanda.
I can't remember it. I have to look it up. But also, on the note of, like, just because I really only had the one idea, and we mentioned earlier, like, stuff we'd like to see Insomniac do potentially in this universe after this. Someone made a really great point about how they could make a Doctor Strange game work. And I forget exactly what they said, but they had like a lot of really cool ideas for like gameplay and like world building that you could do with the Doctor Strange game. And I kind of want that now.
Yeah. If it's anything like the movie or Doctor Strange's bits in Infinity War, I'd be down for that.
Yeah, and like have the skill trees in this game. You could do like a magic skill tree with different spells and stuff.
The skill tree stuff is great, and I love all the different moves they implemented in this game. Like the combat is fantastic. I watched playthrough because I got the game when it first came out, surprisingly on the day. Because I did pre-order it, and it pre-ordered. It went to my uncle's house, but in the email that I got after my purchase, it told me I wouldn't get it until the following Monday. But I went over to my uncle's house for other reasons and found out that it actually came out on the day that it was supposed to, and was so excited by that. And so I played it on the day when it first came out. But I wasn't. Crap, I forgot where I was going with that. What's up?
I wanted to make initially, and I forgot, which is just another overall statement of praise for this game, which is that there is almost, if not zero, ludonarrative dissonance in this game. Where it's like some other games, especially story-driven ones, will have moments of like, man, I wish I could do things with this character in gameplay that they do in cutscenes, but for the sake of the way that the game is designed, I can't do that. There's none of that in this game. There's never a moment where it's like, oh man, I'm playing as Spider-Man. I wish I could do this in a fight, but I can't do it. Once you unlock all the skill stuff, you can do pretty much anything in your mind that it would occur to you to do as Spider-Man.
And I love that. And I remember what I was going to say earlier. I watched playthrough for about half the game before I bought it and started playing it myself. Mm-hmm. And it really aggravates me when like you have a fighting system that is so versatile, but you're just button mashing, like mashing the same buttons throughout every single fight. That's really hard for me to watch. I like to mix it up, like almost like I'm directing a movie. Like I'm having Spider-Man doing different things throughout these fights.
Yep.
As much as possible. And I love that I could do that. I could like hit someone up into the air and web them up and then slam them down and they'd be stuck to the ground, or I could throw them against the wall, or like use one of those special gadgets to web two people together.
Yeah. Or like do the jump up and like you swing at them.
Yeah, you can swing kick people. I loved doing that. I did that a lot.
Yeah.
You can pull people up into the air with you and do specials on them. And by the way, specials, like the finishers in this game, are all beautifully done.
They're so rad.
Yeah, every single one of them is really cool. The suit powers, I thought that was a brilliant idea, because in a lot of games like this, you'll just get different skins, but they gave you unique suit powers that fit each costume, and you can put them on whatever other costume that you want. So
yeah, that's a great, because any other game would have it be where like you're constrained to one costume if you want to use that power, and this one doesn't force you to do that.
And I know you said you played as Spider-Man, like Homecoming, like the Stark suit for most of the game.
I alternated the classic suit, the Stark suit, and what was the other one? I did a little bit of the homemade suit, after I finished the story, I did the advanced suit quite a bit. And there was one other one that I played as a lot, but I'm blanking on it now for some reason. But those four main.
Okay, so me personally, especially for my first playthrough, I felt really disingenuous to not just have the advanced suit the whole time. Like that's the suit that they made specifically for this game. They put a lot of work into it, and its design is actually very story driven.
Yeah, it holds a significance to the story.
And so that's why I played as that pretty much the entire time on my first playthrough. I tried on other suits, but I didn't play through any story missions in anything other than the advanced suit. It felt disingenuous to do that. It didn't feel right to me. I still, like on my second playthrough of the game, I still played through well, I switched to like the classic suit that you start the game with, like their rendition of like the classic like regular Black Spider suit. Oh yeah, I switched to that a few times. But the only suit power that I tried pretty much all of them, but the only one I used consistently is Web Blossom. That was my favorite one.
I actually used Web Blossom the least. I used the camouflage one a lot for stealth sections. I used the drone, the Web Bro, to take down a lot of the more difficult like waves of enemies or the boss fights. What's the other one I used a lot? I didn't actually end up using the refill the focus meter that much.
I didn't either, and I feel like that's kind of the lamest suit power that they have.
It's helpful, but it's not, impressive.
Like the finishers are awesome, and I love doing them, and I do them every chance I can get when I'm in a fight. But it doesn't up the focus meter enough. Like it's going fairly fast, but you take like any damage and like it reverts right back. So I don't know. It's not enough of a.
Yeah, like after a while, the focus kind of.
Like you could just not have it and be making the exact same progress. I feel.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it. So I don't know. Unless there's anything else that you really want to hit? We're like nearing 2.5 hours here. I think we've thoroughly gone through a lot of this game. Closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts. Easily the best Spider-Man game ever made. I've played about, I would say 90% of them. I played everything since the Spider-Man game based on the first Tobey Maguire movie all the way up to now. So yeah, I would say this is easily the best one. I love the story. I love characters and the performances. Literally everything about this game from top to bottom. The score, the graphics are beautiful. I love that this isn't a super new thing. Well, I mean, it kind of is. Like, it's only been within the past half decade that games have really started doing this. But just like having a cutscene and then just transitioning straight into gameplay, I absolutely loved that. This game is like, it's almost the whole game. Like, it's just littered with, you're in a cutscene and then you're just like in a mission doing your thing, and it's so great. It helps it feel more like a true experience as opposed to cutscene, fade to black, you're in gameplay. There is some of that, but like for the most part, you're thrown right into the action after a cutscene, and I love that.
That's just the beauty of like game graphics continuing to improve with time, is that soon we'll get to a point where story-driven games just do not need to default to pre-rendered at all. and you can just go from cutscene to gameplay naturally, like this does.
I think all the performances are fantastic. I do actually really appreciate a lot of the Mary Jane segments, and the first and last Miles segments. I think those are actually really integral to the story, and having you experience Peter's world through the eyes of someone who doesn't have powers, but does have a personal connection to Peter. I love this game. Literally, it's as close to perfect as I think you could have possibly got.
Yeah. Ryan Intihard, Omniac, Yuri Lowenthal, everybody, you guys all came together. You made not only the best Spider-Man game, but probably my favorite Spider-Man story, just in general as of now. You made an honest-to-God masterpiece. You should be brimming with pride. I look forward to whatever it is you do next. This was an amazing experience and will continue to be one as I continue to play it. Thank you, and thank you all for listening.